The morning sun filtered through the tall studio windows, casting a golden hue across the sleek set of Live with Kelly and Mark. The hum of pre-show activity buzzed in the background as stage hands adjusted lights, producers whispered directions into earpieces, and makeup artists gave last-minute touch-ups. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. There was an energy today, faint but unmistakable, that told everyone this episode would be different. Kelly Ripa, poised behind her desk, glanced sideways at Mark Consuelos, who was fiddling with his earpiece. She smiled, but there was a slight tension in her jaw, the kind that only years in live television could disguise. Mark looked up and gave her a small nod. He felt it too. Something about the day had a charge to it. "Places, please," came a voice from the control booth. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The intro music swelled and the camera lights came alive. Kelly's smile lit up as she faced the camera. Good morning and welcome to Live with Kelly and Mark. We're so glad you're starting your day with us. The usual pleasantries followed, a bit of light banter, a laugh about the weather, a comment on their dog's latest misadventure. The audience chuckled, clapped, relaxed. Everything felt normal, on the surface. And now, Mark said with his practiced charm, we're thrilled to welcome a very special guest to the studio. You know her as an actress, an advocate, and a member of one of the most talked about families in the world. Please welcome Meghan Markle. Applause thundered through the studio as Meghan stepped into the spotlight. She was elegance personified, dressed in a soft cream blazer and tailored trousers, her hair in loose waves that framed her face. Her smile was poised, warm yet calculated. As she walked across the stage, every movement seemed choreographed, measured. She was no stranger to cameras, and she wore that familiarity like armor. She took her seat between the hosts, smoothing her jacket as she crossed her legs. Her gaze briefly met Kelly's, then Mark's. There was a momentary pause before anyone spoke. "Meghan, welcome. We're glad you're here," Mark began. "Thank you," she replied with a nod. "Happy to be here." Her voice was calm but carried an edge, like someone prepared for confrontation disguised as conversation. Kelly adjusted her cue cards. "You've been making quite a few headlines recently, and I think a lot of people are curious. How are you doing, really?" Meghan smiled politely. "I'm doing well, thank you. It's been a journey, as you know, but I'm in a good place now, focused on my family, focused on healing." "That's good to hear," Mark said, though I have to admit the pre-interview notes had some unexpected tone. It sounded like there were concerns about the direction of our questions. Meghan's smile didn't fade, but her expression tightened slightly. "I just think, given how my story has been treated by the media in the past, it's fair to ask for respect, not sensationalism." Kelly tilted her head. "Of course, we value respectful conversation here, but we also believe in honest discussion. Sometimes that means asking uncomfortable questions. Honesty and respect aren't mutually exclusive," Meghan replied, her voice still pleasant but firmer now. "No, they're not," Kelly agreed, "but sometimes people confuse honesty with attack, and sometimes people call scrutiny disrespect because they don't like being questioned." Meghan leaned back slightly. "That's an interesting take." Mark stepped in quickly. "We just want to talk openly. That's what our audience expects. And you've spoken out quite a bit lately about the royal family, about the press, about your personal experiences. Those are big topics." "They are," Meghan said, her voice still steady, but her eyes had narrowed slightly. "And I've been as transparent as I can be. But some would argue," Mark said carefully, "that transparency needs consistency. There have been conflicting versions of events. For instance, the story about your wedding. First you said you had a private ceremony 3 days before the public one. Later it was described as a symbolic moment. It confused a lot of people." "That moment was personal," Meghan replied. "It wasn't for the public. It wasn't about legality. It was about us." Kelly's voice took on a cooler tone. "But you brought it into the public in a televised interview watched by millions. So it becomes fair game for clarification." Meghan's smile faltered for the first time. "It's amazing how selective that fairness can be." Kelly arched an eyebrow. "Selective how?" "I mean," Meghan said, "when I speak about things that make people uncomfortable, suddenly it's an issue of credibility. When others speak, it's taken at face value. Why is that?" "Because your words carry consequences," Mark interjected. "You're not just anyone, you're a global figure. When you say something, it affects public opinion, relationships, even institutions." "And what about the consequences to me?" Meghan asked. Her voice was louder now, more forceful. "To my mental health, my safety, my family's well-being? Or do those only matter when they fit the narrative?" Kelly looked straight at her. Of course they matter, but when you accuse people publicly, without specifics, without context, it's fair to ask for clarity. That's not cruelty, that's accountability. Meghan's posture stiffened. So now I'm the one on trial? No one's putting you on trial, Mark said, trying to diffuse the tension. It feels that way, Meghan snapped. Because every time I speak, someone's waiting to dissect my words, call me a liar, twist my truth. Kelly responded evenly. People are just looking for consistency. If your truth changes depending on the audience, that raises questions. My truth hasn't changed, Meghan said, the edge in her voice no longer hidden. What's changed is how much I'm willing to share, because every time I open my mouth, I'm attacked. You're not being attacked, Kelly said firmly. We're asking questions you should have expected. This is live television, not a curated documentary. Meghan laughed bitterly. I should have known. I thought I was walking into a conversation. I see now it's just another performance, just another show. Mark sat forward. That's unfair. We're giving you a platform. We're not editing you, not cutting away. You're speaking freely and being cross-examined for it. Meghan shot back. Kelly's expression hardened. You've sat with Oprah, with The Cut, with magazines that gave you glowing profiles. But now that someone challenges your version of events, it's an ambush. I didn't say that, Meghan said, but there's a difference between curiosity and confrontation. And there's a difference between truth and narrative, Kelly replied coolly. Meghan turned toward her, eyes blazing. So now I'm manufacturing a story? Mark raised his hands. Let's all take a breath. But neither woman was listening. You said you cried at your wedding rehearsal because of your sister-in-law, Kelly continued, but for years the public believed the reverse, and you didn't correct that story until it was convenient. I was trying to protect her, Meghan said, her voice shaking now. I did what they told me to do. I followed their rules. I stayed silent. Until it served you not to, Kelly said flatly. That line seemed to hit hard. Meghan stood abruptly, the scrape of her chair against the floor echoing in the studio. The audience sat in stunned silence. No laughter, no applause, just the sharp electricity of a live show veering far off course. I'm not doing this, Meghan said, her voice trembling. I came here in good faith. Kelly stood too. So did we. The tension in the room was palpable, a pressure building with no outlet. Producers hovered off stage, torn between cutting to commercial or letting the confrontation play out. The control room was chaos, but no one was moving. Mark remained seated, his voice calm. We're just trying to get clarity, that's all. Meghan turned to him, furious now. Clarity or spectacle? He didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, dangerous, fragile, and absolutely riveting. Meghan's breath came shallow, her shoulders rising and falling as she tried to compose herself. The energy in the room had shifted from tense to volatile. Every eye in the studio was locked on her, and the silence was so deep it felt suffocating. She glanced toward the camera, still rolling, and then toward the control booth where producers stood frozen, wide-eyed, like witnesses to a train veering off the rails. I didn't come here to be dissected, she said finally, her voice quieter now, but no less intense. I came here to talk about my work, my life, not to be interrogated about every word I've ever spoken. Kelly, still standing, took a small step forward. You can't separate your life from your words, Meghan. That's the reality of being in the public eye. People want to understand what's real and what's performative. Performative, Meghan repeated, her voice dropping. That's an interesting choice of word coming from someone who's made a career of smiling through a teleprompter. Mark winced. Let's not make this personal. It is personal, Meghan shot back. You brought me here under the pretense of an honest conversation, but you came loaded with accusations. Don't pretend this was ever neutral. No one's pretending, Kelly said calmly. But honesty means looking at the full picture, not just your pain, but the consequences of how you've chosen to share it. Meghan's jaw clenched. You keep talking about consequences, as if I haven't paid enough, as if I haven't been dragged through every headline, every tabloid, every gossip column. But isn't that part of what you stepped into? Mark asked. You married into one of the most public institutions in the world. Did you really expect privacy? I expected protection, Meghan said, her tone rising again. I expected support when I was being racially attacked, when I was pregnant and suicidal. I didn't expect silence. I didn't expect betrayal. Kelly's voice remained level, though her posture had tightened. "We're not questioning your experience. We're questioning the way you've told it, selectively, strategically, and without room for anyone else's version of events." Meghan's hands balled into fists at her sides. "That's not strategy, that's survival." Mark leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "And we hear you, but it's also fair to ask why, if things were so unbearable, you stayed as long as you did, why you stayed silent for so long, then came out swinging." "Because I believed in love," she snapped. "Because I believed things could change. Because I was naive enough to think I'd be accepted." "But when that didn't happen," Kelly added, "you pivoted. You left, you sat down with Oprah, and you told your side. That's your right, but when the facts shift from one interview to the next, people start asking questions." Meghan's voice dropped again. "You think I'm inconsistent because I didn't give the whole story all at once. You try living through trauma and see how clear your timeline is." "That's not what we're saying," Mark said quickly, "but you've positioned yourself as a truth teller. That comes with responsibility." "I have been responsible," Meghan replied through gritted teeth. "But when people twist your story, no matter what you say, you start being selective about what you share." Kelly crossed her arms. "Or careful about which version you share." Meghan turned to face her fully, the temperature between them now below freezing. "So you've decided I'm lying." "I didn't say that," Kelly answered. "I said your narrative changes. There's a difference." "To you, maybe," Meghan hissed, "but to the world? To the people who send death threats? Who call me a fraud? That difference doesn't matter." Mark glanced to the side stage, hoping someone would call for a commercial, but the producers were frozen. The moment was too hot to cut away from. This wasn't just morning television anymore. This was a cultural moment unfolding in real time. "You've talked a lot about being silenced," he said, trying again to shift the tone. "About being voiceless. But now you have the world's attention. Do you feel heard?" Meghan hesitated. For the first time, there was a flash of vulnerability behind her eyes. "Some days, yes. Other days, I wonder if I made it worse. If speaking out only gave people more to attack." Kelly's voice softened slightly, but her words still cut. "That's what happens when you make pain public. It becomes currency. And some people, fairly or not, think you've spent a lot of it." Meghan blinked hard, swallowing emotion. "So I should have just stayed silent. Let them destroy me quietly." "No," Kelly said, her voice even. "But when you speak, expect people to speak back. That's the contract you signed when you sat in that interview chair." Meghan looked like she might say something more, but then bit it back. She turned slightly, her gaze flickering to the audience. Still deadly silent, eyes wide, some mouths open in shock. It was like watching a stage play where the audience wasn't sure if it was still part of the performance or something deeply real unfolding before them. "You know," she said slowly, her voice steadier now. "It's funny, people love the fairy tale. They want the prince, the castle, the wedding, but they don't want to hear what happens after. Not if it's messy. Not if the princess doesn't smile all the time." Kelly's brow furrowed. "You've told that story, Meghan, over and over. But every time the details shift. What was private becomes public. What was painful becomes profitable. That's why people question your motives." "My motives?" Meghan echoed. "My motive was to survive, to protect my children, to stop waking up every morning wondering if I could do it one more day." "And yet," Mark said gently, "some people think the way you've shared your story has hurt others. That's the tension. Your healing became their harm." Meghan turned to him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Do you think I wanted that? Do you think I wanted to be the villain in someone else's story?" "Maybe not," Kelly answered, "but once you tell your version to the world, you don't control how it's received. You open the door." Meghan stepped forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I opened the door because I had to, because no one else was going to." A beat of silence followed. Mark leaned back, the weight of the moment settling around them all. Meghan took a deep breath, wiping at the corner of her eye, though she wasn't crying. Not fully, not yet. If you liked this video, then subscribe.